Welcome back to the Perfectly Homeless podcast. I'm Ayuda May.
And I'm Fred. Today we're diving into a topic that affects more people than most realize.
Let's get into it. Whenever you hear about homelessness in America, it's so easy to just get completely lost in these massive national statistics. But the reality is that the experience of losing your home drastically varies depending on state lines.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the local laws, the resources, even just the weather, it all completely shifts the moment you cross a border.
Right, which is exactly why we are building a custom scorecard for this state, so you listening can see what is actually happening on the ground. Today, we are looking at Michigan, and we're going to build this score dynamically throughout the conversation.
Yeah, so we're evaluating 6 distinct categories, and the score will evolve in real time as we uncover the different realities. We won't reveal the final score until the very end.
Exactly. So, Fred, to start us off, set the scale for us here. What does the landscape in Michigan actually look like right now?
Well, the state recently saw an 8% increase in homelessness in just a single year. So we are looking at a population of over 32,500 people. But, the crucial split you really have to understand here is that only about half of those individuals are actually in shelters.
Wait, only half?
Yeah, exactly half. The other half are completely unsheltered. I mean, they're sleeping outdoors, they're in cheap motels, or very often they're living in their vehicles.
So that's over 16,000 people essentially hidden in plain sight.
Right. And we also have to look at who is being impacted the most. The data reveals some pretty severe systemic racial disparities. Black Michiganders make up 46% of the unhoused population.
Wow. And they only make up, what, maybe 14% of the state's total demographic?
Exactly, yeah, about 14%. So you are seeing this vastly disproportionate impact.
Okay, so to understand why 32,500 people are in this situation, we really have to start with how they lost their housing in the first place, which brings us to our first category, housing affordability.
Right. So right now, Michigan is dealing with this massive post-pandemic eviction crisis. During the pandemic, there was this safety net called CERA, the COVID Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and it actually worked. It kept people housed.
But those funds dried up.
They did. And with those protections ending, eviction filings spiked by an incredible 37%.
That is just a massive jump in 1 year. And when you look at the urban centers like Detroit, the numbers start looking less like a statistic and more like a total structural collapse.
Oh, totally. In Detroit alone, 1 in 3 tenants face the threat of eviction.
1 in 3. I mean, think about the density of that. That is 61,000 renters in one single city living completely on the brink.
Yeah, and the math behind it explains exactly why this is happening. I mean, to afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment in Michigan, you need to earn about $21.65 an hour, working 40 hours a week.
Which is way above minimum wage.
Way above. If you're earning the state's minimum wage, the math completely falls apart. You'd basically have to work 68 hours a week just to afford a 1-bedroom apartment.
It's just impossible. It's like a game of musical chairs where the state keeps removing the chairs, yet we keep blaming the people who are left standing.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, we treat it like a personal failure, but the wages literally just don't cover the rent. So looking at these affordability metrics, this lowers the overall picture.
It really does. And because people cannot afford the rent, they naturally turn to the shelter system, which brings us to our second category, shelter access.
Right, but the shelter system often cannot accommodate the reality of modern families.
No, it really can't. Take a mother in the Lansing area. We'll just call her Lindy to protect her privacy. So she's a mother of 5 kids, and they range from 11 to 17 years old.
And she didn't just lose her home to eviction, right? She actually had to flee.
Right, yeah. Her home was targeted in a drive-by shooting that injured her 12-year-old son, so she fled for their physical safety. And now, for months, she and her 5 kids have literally been living out of her SUV.
And the reason she's stuck in that SUV is so revealing about how broken this bureaucratic architecture is.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. She called shelter after shelter. But because of her family size, and specifically because she has teenage boys, they basically turned her away. The local shelters told her that to get a family bed, she would have to separate her 17 and 13-year-old sons and send them to a men's shelter entirely by themselves.
Wait, I really need to understand the logic here. Why is the bureaucratic system so rigid that it forces a mother to choose between keeping her kids physically safe in a car versus splitting them up and sending young teenagers to a facility for adult men just to get a roof?
Well, it mostly comes down to how these infrastructures were historically built. I mean, decades ago, shelters were primarily designed for single adult males. They just aren't physically or programmatically designed for large families in crisis.
So the system is just completely buckling.
Completely. Look at the 211 data. That's the state emergency hotline. They saw a 23% increase in people inquiring about shelters. But the system is so strained that 48% of requests for motel vouchers went completely unmet.
Almost half. And domestic violence shelters are overwhelmed too, right?
Yeah, they're turning away thousands. State data shows they had to turn away nearly 8,000 adults and over 4,400 children in a single year just because they had no physical space.
Hearing that families are actively being fractured just to receive basic aid, this shifts the score.
It does. And, when the shelter system fails families like Lindy's, they're pushed out into public spaces. And that brings us to Category 3, criminalization and enforcement.
Because the moment you enter public space, you immediately face the state. If you are forced to sleep in your car, you naturally look for somewhere safe to park. And historically, highway rest areas have been that refuge.
Right. But the Michigan Department of Transportation, MDOT, they are pushing to completely change that. They've proposed new rules that would strictly ban extended stays at 61 highway rest areas and 267 carpool lots.
Wow, that is a massive footprint.
Yeah, so staying longer than 48 hours would be strictly prohibited.
Now, I mean, if you're listening to this and thinking, well, rest stops aren't campgrounds, the state has a point, we really have to look at what's actually happening here.
Right. MDOT argues they need these rules for public safety and to respond to traveler complaints. They say they didn't have the legal teeth to ask people to move along or to clear abandoned vehicles.
But sweeping dust under the rug doesn't make a house clean.
Yeah.
I mean, if half the state's unhoused population isn't in shelters, making it illegal to park just forces them into a dangerous game of hide and seek.
Exactly.
Right.
And the penalty is severe. Violating this rule or being caught panhandling or camping on MDOT property becomes a misdemeanor. That means heavy fines or up to 93 days in jail.
Wait, jail time? Just for parking at a rest stop because the shelters are full?
Yes, up to 93 days.
That is just incredibly punitive. Based on this, the current draft score is...
We are currently looking at a draft score of a D.
Okay, a D.
Yeah, but I really want to emphasize to you listening, this is just a preliminary score overlay. We still have additional categories to evaluate, like how people actually survive in their cars and what outreach exists, and those could still significantly change this result.
Right. So moving to Category 4, vehicle dwelling friendliness. With the state cracking down on rest areas, how are people actually surviving the reality of living in their cars, especially in Michigan winter?
Well, contrast those MDOT rules with someone like Paul Body. He's lived out of his SUV for 11 years. He basically moves between Grayling and Alger rest stops just to avoid police harassment.
So he just drives back and forth?
Yeah, constantly. And there's this whole underground survival network. If you look at local Reddit forums, people share these highly specific tactics. They rely on pilot truck stops for safe parking and paid showers.
Right, because those are lit and open 24/7.
Exactly. And people get $10 gym memberships just to stay clean. Some even use casino parking lots in the Upper Peninsula.
Wow, really? Casinos?
Yeah, they tell each other to go inside, get a player's card, and then security might think you're a customer and leave you alone for the night.
That sounds incredibly stressful. Is Michigan inadvertently turning basic survival into a full-time, exhausting job?
Absolutely. The main theme is just constant anxiety. You're constantly dodging local ordinances, trying to figure out where you can legally close your eyes without getting arrested.
And doing that in freezing temperatures. Knowing that mere survival requires dodging the law just to exist, this lowers the overall picture.
It does. But, despite this hostile enforcement, there are localized efforts desperately trying to help, which brings us to Category 5, outreach and social services.
Yeah, there are some fascinating pivots happening on the ground here. Like in Detroit, Mayor Sheffield created a new Department of Human, Homeless, and Family Services.
Right, led by Dr. Luke Schaefer. And the goal there is crucial. They recognize that services were just completely fragmented. They are trying to streamline everything so families have a single, coherent point of entry for poverty resources.
And then up in northern Michigan, the Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency launched this Rapid Exit Diversion program.
Yeah, that program is brilliant. Instead of waiting for someone to hit rock bottom and enter the shelter system, they intervene the moment someone calls. It's a light touch intervention, like paying a security deposit or mediating with a landlord.
And it boasts a 27% success rate in finding immediate housing alternatives, right?
Yes, before they ever get stuck in a shelter bed. And we're even seeing cities like Ferndale shift toward one-on-one resource navigation for vehicle dwellers instead of just calling the police.
Okay, but I have to push back a little here. Is centralizing these services actually solving the problem? Or are we just building a better organized waiting line for resources that don't exist?
Well, that's the ultimate tension. You can navigate someone perfectly through the bureaucracy, but if the housing voucher waitlist is 3 years long, navigation only goes so far. Still, doing this without traumatizing people is a big step forward.
That's true. Seeing these municipalities attempt to treat people with dignity, this raises the overall picture.
It does, but ultimately, outreach only works if there is a permanent pathway out, which is our final category, pathways to permanent housing.
Right. So once you are in the system, how hard is it to actually get out?
Well, the average time people remain trapped in the system is 77 days. But again, Black Michiganders face periods that are 12% longer. And the biggest hurdle keeping everyone trapped is the lasting damage of an eviction record.
This part is so punitive. In Michigan, if a landlord files an eviction against you, it's public record. Even if you win in court or pay your debt, the filing stays on your record.
Exactly. And landlords use these automated background checks now. The computer sees the word eviction and automatically rejects your rental application. There is a push for eviction expungement legislation right now to fix this, but currently it's a massive barrier.
It's basically a financial scarlet letter. It ensures that one moment of poverty becomes a lifelong sentence. This shifts the score.
All right, so we've evaluated the entire landscape. It's time to summarize and assign the final grades.
Let's do it. On the positive side, Michigan's major strengths are definitely those innovative diversion programs in northern Michigan and the new centralized poverty leadership in Detroit.
Right. But the major weaknesses are overwhelming. The alarming lack of family accommodating shelters, a massive post-pandemic eviction wave, and MDOT's push to criminalize vehicle dwelling.
So what are the grades?
Okay, for housing affordability, F for shelter access, F for criminalization and enforcement, D minus. For vehicle dwelling friendliness, F for outreach and social services, B, and for pathways to permanent housing, D.
Wow. So synthesizing those grades together, the final perfectly homeless state score for Michigan is a D minus.
Yes, Michigan earns a D minus because, despite some incredible on-the-ground outreach, the overarching systems punish poverty rather than resolve it. When a minimum wage job can't pay for a roof, when shelters split up families and the state tries to jail you for sleeping in your car, the system is fundamentally broken.
You know, it makes you think back to Lindy. When the new school year starts for her 5 kids, how are they supposed to focus on their education from the back seat of an SUV while the state actively tries to make their parking spot illegal?
That's the perfectly homeless state school for Michigan.
I'm Ayuda.
And I'm Fred.
Let us know in the comments if there's a state you'd like to see next. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next state. This is a 50-state journey through how America actually treats people without housing, and every state tells a different story. If you'd like to support the project, visit the Perfectly Homeless Etsy store and pick up a PH hoodie. Every purchase helps fund future episodes and keeps these stories in front of the public. Wear the logo. Start a conversation. Because homelessness isn't someone else's problem anymore. It's happening in every state, every city, and more neighborhoods than most people realize. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next state.